Hello, my name is Gil Penalosa, and this is the bi-weekly webinar Cities for Everyone. Originally, I'm from Bogota, Colombia, where I led the construction of over 200 parks and also took a small program of a few kilometers and thousands of people, ciclovia, open streets, and turned it into the world's largest program with over 1 million people out every Sunday on holiday. But this is my 25th year living in Toronto, Canada. And here I'm the founder and chair of 880 Cities, as well as Cities for Everyone. And the goal of this webinar is to give back. I've been fortunate to have worked in over 350 cities in every continent. And now I'm seeing how things can happen if you have passionate advocates. So the goal of this webinar is to help you become a passionate advocate on whatever you want that has to do with creating equitable, sustainable, and fun cities. Today, we have a fascinating guest that is going to do a presentation, Charles Marohn. He is the founder and president of Strong Towns. And actually, he's going to be talking about that, how to create, building a strong town. Charles, thank you very much for accepting the invitation. We got people from all over, eager to hear from you, to learn, and then put into practice. So tell us a little bit about yourself, and then do your presentation. Thanks, Charles.
Hey, thank you. And Gil, I have to say, I could sit and listen to you just read people's names coming in. Your enthusiasm and your excitement, it just brings me a lot of joy. So it's a very great pleasure to be here with you. I was able to.
And I agree with you. It's kind of a blessing. I pinch myself when I see that we have people from all over the US, all over, but also from Chile and Paraguay and Kenya and South Africa and Sweden. I said, oh my God. So it's great.
Yes.
But they're here to hear you, not me. Thank you.
Well,
thank you for having accepted the invitation.
Absolutely. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for doing this. I'm excited you're going to have Ethan on next in a couple of weeks, and this is a beautiful thing that you're doing. So let me make good use of people's time, and we'll do a lot of questions at the end. One of the things that I struggled with as a young engineer was the way we were building our cities. I ran across this photo at one point of my hometown. I live in the little city of Brainerd, Minnesota. It's a couple hours north of Minneapolis, in Minnesota, in the United States. And this is what it looked like at its very beginning. My city was founded in 1870, and this was a photo taken in 1870, just some little pop-up shacks. And I came across this next photo from 1905, so 35 years later, basically a generation later. And the interesting thing about this is the exact same street. It's 30 years later, and you can see those little pop-up shacks are gone. They've been replaced with buildings that are obviously much more substantial. Ultimately, these wood buildings, these 2- and 3-story wood buildings in this street, would be replaced with this here. This is the same street, just a couple decades later. What this is showing is a pattern of growth and development very different than the one we use today. Today, we build cities all at once. We build them to a finished state, kind of neighborhood by neighborhood. We build in large blocks. But when we look back at past historic development patterns, what we see is this incremental approach, this incremental development pattern, cities growing a little bit over time, kind of on a continuum. It's interesting because I would get a little bit of pushback. I've been showing these photos for over a decade now. I would get a little bit of pushback saying, well, that's cute, Chuck. That's the way that small towns in central Minnesota grow, but that's not the way that real cities grow. And then I came across these photos. Ethan, I don't know if you recognize any of these places, but at some point you may recognize a place up the street from where you live. These are, incremental changes over time that ultimately came this place here, right? This is the way we built cities literally for thousands of years. We can go around the world and we can look at the evolution of cities, the evolution of building places, and we see that they were always built incrementally over time. A lot of kind of messiness, kind of chaotic development pattern, places growing incrementally up, incrementally out, and becoming incrementally more intense. as I studied this, as I looked at this, as I tried to understand this and how it was different, there's so many different things. I'm going to focus on the financial aspects of this today, because I want you to recognize when you look at this street, you're looking at a very, very modest investment, right? The people who came here took the materials that they had on hand. They built the kind of smallest little lean-to buildings that they could. They didn't expect these places to last. They didn't expect these places to be around for centuries. They were just getting started, right? But as more and more people moved to this place, as more and more people came to this little settlement in the middle of the woods, something kind of simple yet magical happened. The land actually starts to go up in value. The more people move there, the more demand, in a sense, there is for land, particularly land in the center of the city. That land goes up in value. And even though it's, in this instance, very modest values, there's still an increase, right? There's still a demand. At the same time, these buildings start to fall apart. They start to decline. They were put together not to last forever, but, you know, to be kind of temporary. Let's get this city up and going. And that simultaneous increase in land value and decrease in the structural integrity of these buildings creates a natural redevelopment potential, where it makes sense for someone to buy one of these buildings or to build a building adjacent in an empty spot and build something more intense. And that's the financial mechanism. There's social mechanisms and cultural mechanisms and all kinds of things going on. But if we just pull out the finances, that's the financial mechanism of renewal. And we see that in place here as well. As more and more people move to this place, it becomes a more substantive city. It becomes a more desirable place to be. If we were to look at this street here and say, go a block or two off in either direction, the type of development pattern you'd see would have the intensity of this, right? The city would grow incrementally out, incrementally up, and then incrementally thicken up. But that thickening up process has a financial component to it. As more and more people move here, the value of the street becomes more. The value of the land becomes more. More and more people mean you can sell more and more stuff. There's more and more demand for the place. All of that rising land value combines with structures that over time need maintenance, need repair, need to be taken care of. And all of a sudden you have, again, this coming together, this redevelopment pressure, taking these 2- and 3-story wood buildings and making them into buildings of brick and granite. This is a pattern we see repeated over and over and over again around the world. Wherever we see pre-Great Depression development patterns, this is what we see. This is the human experience. I want to show you what this street looks like today. This is the same street, taken roughly from, and I'm going to back up 2 slides, roughly from this shot here. So this is what it looked like in 1905. This is what it's looking like in 2024. And you can see, obviously, a dramatic shift in the development pattern. You now have a lot of parking lots, a lot of half-occupied buildings. I think we can ask ourselves why this shift, and I want to discuss that in a second, but I want to pause and point out one thing, because I've been talking about finances a bit here. Recognize that this street, what you see here, these couple blocks, has $500,000 of public infrastructure invested in them. You add up the street surfacing itself, the asphalt, the aggregate, you look at the stormwater system, you look at the sanitary sewer, the water, the electric lights, the sidewalks, all that, you've got $500,000 of public investment. Where is the wealth that my little town is going to tap into to sustain that investment? It used to be there, right? We used to have lots of wealth in this place, lots of wealth to pay for all of that public infrastructure, all the stuff going on, where is that wealth today? It does not exist. It is gone. And we're going to delve into city finances here for a bit, but I'm going to give you a kind of the big insight of strong towns today, and let you kind of mull it over as we go forth. The cities of North America, particularly of the United States and Canada, are functionally insolvent. We have built more stuff and have not enough tax base to take care of it. We have built more stuff than we have the capacity to maintain financially. And we do not have the tax base or the wealth to sustain everything in which we have built. This is a shared experience amongst North American cities, and it is something that has created an underlying tension in all of our neighborhoods, in all of our places. Why did we make this shift, right? Why did we make this change? And I think it's important to recognize the profound shift that happened during the Great Depression and World War II. A lot of times as planners, I have an undergrad degree in civil engineering. I have a master's degree in urban planning. A lot of times we are taught in both of those degree structures that what is going on here is the automobile. We have the automobile, so we start building cities around cars. And the interesting thing is when you travel the world, and there's a lot of people here I recognize that are not from the United States or Canada. When you travel the world, I've been fortunate enough to see a lot of cities where they have automobiles, where automobiles are present. People drive, people use automobiles, but their cities do not look like ours, right? They do not look like the things we have built here in North America. There are parts of them that may have that look and feel, but for the most part, they do not look anything like the cities we build here. The common denominator is not the automobile. The common denominator is an underlying growth strategy that came out of the Great Depression and World War II. The idea was that we had gone through the Great Depression, this disorienting period of time where we didn't really understand the causes of it, still don't today. I think we debate them. We certainly didn't understand how to get out of it. We struggled to get out of it. The thing that got us, technically out of the Great Depression, if you're an economist, is the Second World War, right? One of the most horrific experiences ever. The idea when the war was winding down was that we needed to create some type of economic activity that would not only deploy or employ all of these troops that were coming back from the war, but would keep our economy growing, would build a middle class, would create great American prosperity. And that experiment, that economic experiment, was the suburbs. We went out to build, create, turn cities into, in a sense, machines of growth, kinetic growth machines, so that we could stay out of the next Great Depression. I'm going to show you what this looks like. I've got a good map of Fresno, California, and it illustrates this very well. If you are familiar with the North American development pattern, if you live in a North American city, you probably experienced this to one degree or another. This is the boundaries of Fresno in 1897. So this little yellow box is the size and extent of Fresno, California in 1897. I'm going to advance the slides now, and I want you to see how this changes over time. So here's 1909, 1922. Here's the middle of the Great Depression. And then here's the end of World War II. I'm going to pause here and just note, even during the Great Depression, Fresno continued to grow, right? This is that kind of organic growth model, this thickening up over time, incrementally growing up, incrementally growing out, maturing in place, the city continuing to grow. Even during the Great Depression, you see that the city has experienced some growth. The amazing thing about the traditional development pattern, when we look at it, it is capable of growing a bit in rough times. It can grow a lot in good times. The thing is that it doesn't tend to fall apart. That's the kind of organic nature of it. But now we're at the end of World War II. We don't want to slide back into Great Depression. We want to grow. We want to create jobs, build a middle class, have a thriving economy, one where GDP goes up, but we have a lot of transactions going on. So here's what happens. Let's start this again. 1958, 1970. You'll see the massive horizontal expansions, 1983. Now we're going to go to the mid-1990s. And then my last slide here is from 2010. Massive horizontal growth, right? Lots and lots of transactions. And if you're measuring things like gross domestic product, right? If you are an economist, a bean counter in Washington, D.C., or on Wall Street, and you measure success in terms of transactions, this development pattern, these growth patterns, this style of development creates a lot of transactions, right? It juices GDP in a way that is very affirming when that's what you measure. But of course, the impacts of this financially on cities is tremendous. I'm just going to point out here, my little hometown of Brainerd, Minnesota, where I live, where I'm recording from today. I'm actually recording from the junior high, or where I went to junior high in the city of Brainerd, Minnesota. It's now been turned into an art center. So I have one of the artist studios that I record out of. This little building here, this little city here at the end of World War II had a population of 13,500 people. Today, my hometown has a population of 13,500 people. So no growth in population, but we are 10 times the size. We are 10 times the area. We have 10 times the amount of stuff, right? Roads, pipes, streetlights, all that. Let me illustrate this to you with some numbers that I was part of a team that went to Lafayette, Louisiana a few years ago. Urban 3, my good friend Joe Minicozy out of Asheville, North Carolina. I'm going to show some more Urban 3 stuff here in a second. Asked me to come and join them as they tried to help Lafayette understand why their city was broke, why they didn't have the money to maintain their most basic infrastructure systems. Here's one of the things we discovered about their water system, for example. At the end of World War II, Lafayette had a population of a little over 33,000. In 2015, that had grown to 121,000. So a 3.5 times rate of growth, a very robust post-war rate of growth, right? Lafayette's been very successful in growing, having transactions since the end of World War II. But when we look at something like what it takes to provide drinking water for the people of Lafayette, Louisiana, at the end of World War II, it took 5 feet of pipe per person. Today, it takes 10 feet of pipe per person. Or I'm sorry, it takes 50 feet of pipe per person, a 10x increase. When we look at like what it took to provide fire protection for the city of Lafayette, at the end of World War II, it was 2.4 hydrants per 1,000 people. Today, it's 21 times that amount. Now, you might be thinking, and I've heard people say, well, Chuck, okay, I get it, but we live a higher standard of living today. We have bigger houses, we have more stuff, we've got bigger yards, we just enjoy a higher quality of life. And I think that is true in some ways. Again, when we measure transactions, when we measure things in terms of stuff, certainly we have more stuff, we have consumed more, we have more transactions. But if we look at this from a community wealth standpoint, are we wealthier? We can even look at family income, right? And we see that while Lafayette has been able to grow their population by 3.5 times, it's taken 10x and 20x of liabilities long-term to do that. We can look at things like household income. And in today's dollars, the typical family in Lafayette in that same period of time has only experienced 1.6 growth in their income. If we look at the typical Lafayette family, there's more families today with a negative net worth actually owe more than they have in assets than there was 40 years ago. What we see is that this development pattern generates a lot of transactions, but it creates a lot of liabilities for local government. It creates a lot of liabilities for families, for small businesses. It creates a huge kind of financial overhang burden on people just to exist in a place. I want you to see kind of the intimacies of what I'm talking about here, because we all live in this to one degree or another. Even if you're not part of the United States, you see the North American development pattern spreading across the world to places. It's kind of a mark of affluence. And it is a mark in affluence the same way that a courtyard would have been a mark in affluence for the king 400 years ago, right? We can have all this wasted space that we can flaunt in a sense. And the North American development pattern wastes and burns a lot of space and kind of flaunts that in a way that you become numb to at a certain point. These are 2 blocks in my hometown. It's actually right up the street from the school, the studio where I'm at today. If you look at these 2 blocks, you'll see they're the exact size, same area. They have the same amount of public infrastructure investment. So this is a true apples to apples comparison, right? The same neighborhood, the same thoroughfare, everything about them is generally the same. The only thing different is the style of development. That block on the left, in fact, all 3 of these blocks in the 1920s was the far edge of the city. As the city was growing incrementally out, these 3 blocks were the next increment. And what you see on the left is, you can think of as that pop-up shack. I showed you at the beginning, the pop-up shacks from the 1870s. This would have been the 1920s equivalent of that pop-up shack, right? The little buildings on the far edge of town. The people who built these 3 blocks, they assumed that the historic development pattern would continue. Eventually, more and more people would move to the neighborhood. You would get second and third stories here. The buildings would become more intense, more ornate. This is what we see around the world for thousands and thousands of years. That didn't happen, however, right? After the 1920s, we had the Great Depression. Then we had World War II. Then we had the city turned into a machine of growth, a kinetic growth machine. And we just skipped right over these blocks and started building out on the edge. These 3 blocks have stagnated for almost a century now. The block on the right that I've highlighted used to look just like the block on the left. We were able to, here in the city, get that torn down, and in its place, build a Taco John's drive-through. I realize we have people from all over the world, many different cultures, many different languages. I know most of you have not heard of Taco John's. Taco John's is a very successful Midwestern franchise. You can think of this as Norwegian Mexican food. So Gil, you would probably love it. You'll have to come here to Brainerd someday and experience Taco John's with me. Everybody here was very excited about this transaction, right? We had labeled these 3 blocks as blight. We got the one torn down. We got something now that is shiny and new, that meets our development pattern, that meets our city plan, that meets our building code. It's got the right ADA compliant bathrooms. It's got a commercial sprinkler system, plenty of parking, all the stuff that we said we wanted. It checked every single box. What nobody bothered to look at, what nobody bothered to contemplate, was that old and blighted block. You add up all those properties in there, and even though they're run down, they're not highly valued, we don't, really care about that pawn shop or that liquor store or what have you, that total block has a value of $1.1 million. The Taco John's, it's the same size block, the same area, the same amount of public infrastructure investment, the same long-term cost to the community to provide ongoing service and maintenance. That block is only worth $600,000. The city's actually collecting 78% more taxes on the block on the left than they are on the right. And when we look at things like how many employees there are, how many local owners they are, how many local businesses that they employ, the people on the left employ local attorneys, local banks, local advertisers, all this stuff. They're part of an economic ecosystem within the community. On the right, none of that exists. And the tax base is much, much, much lower.
And
this is a
Charles,
pattern we see. Yeah, go for it, Gil.
No, just a small comment. This is very applicable everywhere. Yeah, I love this slide.
Oh, yeah.
Because the across Canada, the small cities, the large cities, the same thing has happened, and across the US, the small ones, the big ones. But beyond, for example, in Mexico, they did a study of the 100 largest cities, and the one over the last 30 years or 40 years, the largest 100 cities has doubled the population, more than double, to 2.3 times the population. But the footprint has grown by 11 times, times. So all of this that you were talking about, how can you provide these services when you double the population but grow by 11 times? And also these issues of the taxes. So I want everybody also to think that this is not just applicable to Charlestown, but across Canada, across the world, in most places, this is very applicable. Thank you very much, Charles, for this, because this is happening. How can we bring the water and the sewage and the electricity and the parking and the things when that is happening? And the numbers, let's keep an eye. Sorry for the interruption, Charles. Go ahead.
No, it's good. No, you're good. It is remarkable to me because we congratulate ourselves so often on our success in attracting growth. And the reality is it's very easy to attract growth today if you're willing to bankrupt your city, make your city insolvent, make future people have struggle to make ends meet. I mean, that's not a hard trick, right? And I think what we see in the pre-Great Depression, the organic development pattern, is that people of the past figured this out. There was no one to bail them out. There was no system that allowed them to do this because the cities that did that went away, right? We've just done this at scale. I want to show you, and I'm gonna go through this really quick because these maps show very similar things. This is work that my friend Joe Minicozzi's done with Urban 3. And what I'm going to show you now is a map of financial productivity. Where you see the lines go up in the air, you're going to see the highest financial productivity, the places that are creating the most value, the most wealth per acre. This is Buffalo, New York, and I start with Buffalo because I have a soft spot for Buffalo, and also because Buffalo is one of these cities that has suffered a lot in the post-war experiment. They have tried all the shiny things, tried to pursue growth as much as they can, but they've lost population every single year since the end of World War II. But if we step back and we look at Buffalo and we say, where is Buffalo's wealth? It's in their core downtown. It's in their walkable neighborhoods. It's in the stuff that was built prior to the Great Depression. And it absolutely dwarfs everything around it. Gil, this is what we see in city after city after city. We see the same type of pattern. It doesn't matter if it's a large city. It doesn't matter if it's a small city or a medium-sized city. It doesn't matter if it's northern or southern. It doesn't matter if it's on the coast or on the inland plains. Wherever we see the pre-Great Depression development pattern, wherever we see good walkable neighborhoods with corner stores and kind of a traditional development pattern, what we see is tremendous financial productivity. Even when it is in decline, even when it is occupied by some of the poorest people in the community. As we go further and further out in time, as we get to the newer development pattern, we see increasingly insolvent cities. We see cities that over time become more and more and more indebted, more and more weighed down with liabilities, and have a tax base that is spread out and denuded. This is actually Lafayette, Louisiana. And while the maps I've shown you show financial productivity, this map is actually a profit and loss map. Every place you see a blue line is a line that generates more taxes and fees for the city every year than it costs to provide service. Every place you see a red is a place where it costs more to provide ongoing service and maintenance than that property generates in revenue. That center is, of course, the core downtown. There is a crescent of blue that runs just to the east of that. These are what those neighborhoods look like. When you look at them, they don't visually look successful. The downtown of Lafayette is a nice place, but it's not thriving. When we look at obviously the poor neighborhood in the bottom right, that does not look thriving. But when we analyze it from a financial standpoint, these areas are subsidizing the stuff we're building brand new today. This is kind of typical of what that red area looks like. We see universally across North America subsidy from the older neighborhoods, often poorer neighborhoods, to the more affluent neighborhoods out on the edge. This is an experience we see repeated over and over and over again, including within my community. At Strong Downs, we talk a lot about what to do about this. We publish 2-3 articles every day. We've got 3 different podcast streams. We do a lot of video, a lot of social media. I'm going to simplify all of that down to one point. So understand there's a lot more depth here than the one thing, but just for time, I want to kind of emphasize that we are done expanding cities horizontally. We are done with this kinetic growth machine. We're done with the idea that cities benefit from transactions. We actually need cities to start building wealth. We need them to start thickening up. We need them to start making better use of the infrastructure they have already built. And the way we do that is not the traditional method. It's not a method of commissioning a big study, submitting a big grant application, getting your public works department in to find the big project they can do, the build it and they will come kind of thing. What it looks is a lot more like just tightening up the ship, just going back and recognizing where the city as we've built it is not working. Gil, I've been inspired by your work for a long time. And I'd say, you know, what we have done is downstream and derivative of a lot of the insights that you've had. I think the open street stuff is a huge, I mean, the open street stuff is a huge inspiration for us. I think people can learn a lot from it. At Strong Downs, we've created a 4-step approach to making the lowest risk, highest returning public investments that you can make. And I'm going to share that with you. It's actually quite simple, although very radical. Step number one is to go out and humbly observe where people in the community struggle. Where are people having a difficult time using the city as it has been built? The second step then is to ask the question, what's the next smallest thing we can do right now to address that struggle? Not what is the thing we can get the grant for? What's the thing that will fix this forever? What's the thing I've always wanted to do? What's the thing we can do with straw bales and paint and cones to just make this a little bit better today? Step three then is to do that thing. Do it right now. Don't waste time studying it. Don't form a committee. Don't bring in a consultant. Just do it. It's a little thing. And then the fourth step is to repeat this process over and over and over. If we do this, what we find is that we can take neighborhoods and really mature them, very plus them, make them not only places of greater investment and greater wealth, but greater prosperity, greater desirability, higher quality of life for the people who live there, particularly when we start in the neighborhoods that have struggled the most. If you're interested in strong towns, we've got 2 books that are out. You can, of course, go to strongtowns.org, our website, and get our media all the time. These 2 books are currently in publication. There's a new book coming out in April called Escaping the Housing Trap. It's going to be all about housing and what we do about our current housing crisis. And Gil, I'm just going to pause here and say thank you. And I know we wanted to leave a lot of time for questions, and I love questions. So we can get to that now. Thank you, everybody.
These people, these hundreds of people connected, they are passionate advocates. They want to do. What is your call to action? So they have heard you, they are learning, they're going to get your book and things. What do you think they, like tomorrow, what is it that they should go out and do? How can they participate? What is the call to action?
Our call to action is pretty simple. If you're inspired by this message, go tell someone else about it. If you think strong towns as interesting things, bring someone else into the conversation. A lot like what you're doing, Gil, we try to give away a lot of our time, a lot of our energy. How do we share this message? So all of our content is free. All the stuff on our website is free. Come and access it, share it with other people. If you want to get going in your place, if you're not an elected official, or even if you are, if you're like, I want to talk to people, strongtowns.org/local. We have a program called Local Conversations, which is people getting together. We have almost 200 of them now around the world. People who get together, talk strong towns, figure out what they can do in their place to make their place better. And if you're really, really interested in this, I mean, come to the Strong Towns website. We've got tons of materials for you. We've got 5 core campaigns with action items in each one for you to get going, start making policy changes, start getting things done.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
And by the way, I'm glad that you mentioned Memphis, because 2 weeks ago we had Carol Colera. And Carol Colera led an amazing construction of an amazing park on the river on Memphis. And people remember, you can go to the website, gpenalosa.ca, and then you go to the webinar, all the sessions recording. So if you miss Carol Colera's, that Charles is talking about Memphis, she talks a lot about Memphis because she's leading the Memphis riverfront. Also, Charles' presentation is going to be on the website in 2 days. So by Thursday, it will be available for everyone. And I want to invite Charles and everyone in 2 weeks from now. Ethan Kent is going to be talking about placemaking and the place movement around the world. And it's also about doing things and acting. Charles and everyone that is participating from all over the world, I want to thank you for keep in mind, this is about being passionate advocates. There is not going to be a Martian coming down to fix our cities. It's up to each one of us. Don't give up. We can really make cities that are not only more equitable, more sustainable, but also more fun. Charles, thank you very much. And everybody have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Gil. Take care, everybody.
Charles, thank you very, very much. What a fascinating presentation. So much to learn, so many ideas for everybody to consider the real cost and benefits on creating cities. How do we also need to start immediately with small things in your own block, in your own neighborhood. The key, getting things moving, getting things acting. And also the city leaders must know the true cost of sprawl, the true cost of low density, and the benefits of having a denser cities where everybody is going to be able to have proximity, to be able to walk to all of their basic needs and develop friendships and communities. This is a huge financial issue for any city, anywhere in the world. And I love how you provided examples of the US, but all of those are equally applicable anywhere in Canada, Latin America, Africa, and other places. I hope that everybody that is watching this video will share it with your decision makers, elected officials, city staff, media, colleagues, advocates. Charles, thank you. And everybody, I'll see you 2 weeks from now, every other Tuesday, same time, same place.